let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Joe Trippi here, Democratic strategist and host of That Trippi Show. And with me is the other Joe, celebrated journalist Joe Klein. Joe's been covering political campaigns longer than I've been running them. It's been another week of mixed signals from the Trump administration on Iran and major upsets for Democrats in special elections. Despite this rare moment of consistency, I'm sure Joe and I will find something to disagree about. Joe, where do you want to get started, my friend?
Well, I think that we should start with the quote of the week, which is about Iran, which is the story of the week, but comes by way of Minnesota, and one of its Senate candidates, Michelle Tafoya, late of the ESPN sidelines.
Now, at least just kind of keeping a stiff upper lip. Maybe you take one less trip to Starbucks, and so that gas goes a little further until this thing is over and these gas prices come back down again. Let's just try to be patriots about this.
Let them drink latte.
Yes. Well, I've always had this saying, which I think I almost believe, which is politicians make the best politicians. And, sometimes there are talented outsiders who come in and steal the show. One of them is the President of the United States right now. But when I think about people like Stephen A. Smith of ESPN, thinking that he can join the 2028 presidential race, I would advise him to take a look at Michelle and her let them eat cake or drink latte statement. But also, the deeper thought here is that we have really lost, we've lost the knack for going to war. America as a country just doesn't know how to do it anymore. We once did during World War II and even the Korean War. But the one thing every war since has had in common was that it wasn't a war to the death. World War II demanded unconditional surrender, which is one of the terms that Trump has been throwing around. And we got it from both Germany and Japan, and then rebuilt them brilliantly, one of the great humanitarian acts in human history. This war, unless we're ready to go deeper into it, which is a very big question, and actually put boots on the ground, I think that we're stuck for a while.
Well, you're certainly stuck. The American people are certainly stuck with the consequences of high gas prices, the fertilizer that farmers can't afford, and that's going to continue in any, whether we put boots on the ground or not. The problem here is that this was a war of choice. We've seen several of those, Iraq being one of them. But there really were no weapons of mass destruction. It's literally doing the same thing in regime change. And now Trump is now saying that we've had regime change because these are all new people in this regime.
Right. Well,
it's like, yeah, okay. That did not turn out very well in Afghanistan or Iraq either. But again, I think like you mentioned, I think on one of the last shows about how people you've got to worry about not rooting against the troops. I don't think anybody is, but rooting for this thing to end somehow. But I don't know. I don't see that's going to happen anytime soon. Obviously, more troops are being moved into the region. It's hard to fathom Trump moving all that, all those forces in and then not using them. It's not quite. He gets enamored with that, with our military's capability, and he may be again, he clearly got it wrong by going in. I think he may make this worse again because he's not capable of seeing what the consequences might be. I'd get your take.
Well, one thing occurs to me that I've learned in these podcasts is that while you and I are both Joes and we're great friends, we see the world in a little different way. You see the world through the lens of politics, and so do
Yeah.
I to a certain extent. But when you think about Iran, you think about high gas prices
Yeah.
and so on. I see the world through the lens of policy, which doesn't mean that I'm not a political junkie, which I am. But my first thought is, in this case, what do we actually do now? And how can this be made to work? I mean, I was against the war in Iraq until we got into Iraq. And at that point, I knew we couldn't just leave because we owed the Iraqi people a little bit of stability. And I think that in this case, now that Trump has blundered into this without any understanding of what he was getting into, we can't leave until we do a favor for the rest of the world and make sure that the Strait of Hormuz is clear, and also which will require boots on the ground, and also get a hold of the highly enriched uranium, which is under the ground in Isfahan, which would take a special ops mission, a pretty complicated one. So I think that my thought right now isn't so much as about the political impacts, because it's still a million years from now, the election, although this ain't going to help him any. But it is about the military practicalities of bringing this thing to a halt. Because I think one thing we saw today, when we saw the list of Iranian counter demands, is another thing I've been saying throughout, which is Iranians think that they're the world's best negotiators, which makes them the world's worst. They don't know how to negotiate. They don't want to negotiate. Their pride gets in the way. And I think that there may be stuff going on, out of our vision on the third track. But I'm not very optimistic about negotiations with the Iranians.
No. So let me look on the politics. Yeah, the politics are all bad. What I'm raising is, okay, we've got a very powerful military capable of doing just about anything that they're ordered to do. Okay, I'm sure that they were not crazy happy about the president wanting to go in the first place, but they did. It was a blunder. I'm sure probably many of our military leaders perceived that could happen. And what I'm saying is he could blunder again. In other words, it may be a blunder to put troops on the ground, to go in for the enriched uranium. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying I'm not. Yes, can our military do it? Yes, but can he order that? In doing that, could it be another blunder because Trump, again, he can't, dealing with the politics, he cannot release the Epstein files to distract from the debacle in Iran. So I'm just saying, it's not that I disagree with you so much on this. It's that having faith that Trump actually understands. I mean, other than what he wants to get the hell out of this as fast as he possibly can. Now that he realizes that what he's unleashed and the higher gas price, all the politics of it, he wants out. And so, in trying to get out, he could make a bigger blunder than than the one he created is to, make this worse. That's all. I'm not arguing.
We've been known to do that in the
Yeah.
past. And if I could just give you my sense of the history of the U.S. military and the question of attacking Iran. Back in the 2000s, during the mission accomplished phase of the war in Iraq, George W. Bush gathered his generals together in the tank, which is the Pentagon's equivalent of the Situation Room.
Yeah.
And he asked them, "Okay, we did Iraq. Should we do Iran now?" And every last one of them said, "Are you crazy? No." Well, they didn't say, "Are you crazy?" because they're military people, but they said no in the most "are you crazy" sort of way. And just in the run-up to this war, we saw Dan Kane, who is a very sober-minded, serious chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, even if his nickname is Raisin Kane. But we saw Kane warning against this up until the very end. And I think that my contacts with the military, they tend to be extremely conservative, and even more so now in the era of an all-volunteer army, because so much is invested, both personally and in training and spiritually, in taking care of those troops and keeping them in the best fettle they can, that they understand that, as Donald Trump does not, that war is not a video game. It's not a game of any sort. It is a disaster. Anytime a war happens, it is a disaster.
Right. No, and I think that the bigger thing here is, it's hard to imagine, because first of all, they've been able to hit these targets with minimal casualties, but I think that changes if there are boots on the ground. I'm not arguing that that it'll go up exponentially or anything, but I think the preparation that they failed to do to convince the American people, particularly with the intelligence community and the military community sending up flares saying, warning not to do it. It's unclear to me that the American people are prepared that they're going to rally around I think they'll rally around the troops for sure. But the idea of troops on the ground may appall them. And that it was a blunder that got us to the place where we had to put troops on the ground, particularly given even those in Trump's base that are still hanging with him. But I'm sure none of them thought we would be putting troops on the ground in the Middle East again. And I think that's a real barrier to break through to get support. I think this could really be a deeper blunder, but we'll see.
But
I don't want it to be. None of us want that. I'm just saying. But
the question is,
track record here.
Look, you're absolutely right. In the post-Vietnam era, which we can't seem to get out of,
right.
Boots on the ground is an obvious red line. No president wants to go there. One did, which was George W. Bush, and he regretted it. He still regrets it, I think.
Yeah, right.
And it's unless you have a very circumscribed goal, as George H.W. Bush did in the first Gulf War, then you're going to get into trouble. You're going to be in a quagmire. And you're especially going to be in a quagmire in a place like Iran, which is one of the countries most sensitive on the face of the planet to being invaded and to being held as a lesser place, as a colonial entity. I mean, the Iranians, it's actually really amazing. The Iranians took the right side in World War II. They were with us and they were with the Russians. And then both we and the Russians invaded Iran during the war to secure their oil. So even when they sided with us, we invaded them. And everybody in Iran knows that. Everybody in Iran remembers that. Now, the question is, with our military precision, whether we can make the Strait of Hormuz campaign, which I suspect is coming, the equivalent of George H.W. Bush's 100-hour war against Iraq in 30 years ago.
Well, it's interesting because the first Gulf War was probably the one where Democrats and everybody should have supported it. And again, famous did not. The George W. going into Iraq was the war that Democrats should have stood up and said, hell no, but instead voted for it, except for very few people. And so it's going to be interesting to see where this one stacks up in that, in that sort of partisan frame that I think Democrats got wrong and both made the wrong move both times.
This goes back to a basic problem that Democrats have with the military, which is they don't understand it. And I remember when in 2003, when Bush was trying to round up votes in Congress to let him embark on an invasion of Iraq. It wasn't a declaration of war; it was a declaration of intent. But I remember there were Democrats like Richard Holbrooke, the former diplomat, who were telling people like Hillary Clinton, who was then a senator from New York, that she had to vote for the war, or else she would seem as stupid as the Democrats did the time before. But this was a completely different
right.
war.
They got it. It was trying to fight the last war. Not make the same mistake. And I think this one. I think the rational decision is to be opposed putting troops on the ground. I just don't see, you blundered into this. There's got to be another way, a negotiated way out. And I'm with you, though, that the problem with that is as you've said to me many times, well, we've got men and material and weapons, and they've got time, and that's where Iran. So the negotiating thing would prolong the high gas prices and everything. But I don't see any quick way to end that. That's what I'm saying. Taking these islands, securing the Gulf, the Strait, is going to take weeks, I would think.
It's going to take weeks to pre-position them. They're not there yet.
So that's what I'm saying. I just don't know if like I said, Iran has time, and because there was no prep for this, and because I'm sure we'll be at $4 gasoline by tomorrow or next week and higher. I think you gotta negotiating the way out. But again, why would they negotiate with this administration at this point? I mean, what can you believe? So
you have to look at the two sets of opening demands, and they're really kind of hilarious when you put them.
Next to each match them up. It's nice.
I mean, Trump's 15-point plan doesn't seem unreasonable to me now that we've gone in and done this. It is no more nuclear activity, limits on your ballistic missiles, and no more funding of the proxy groups like Hezbollah in the region. And then, items 12 through 15 in that list are goodies that we're going to give to Iran to make, the Iranian people at least very happy and prosperous once more. On the other side, you have the Iranian demands, which are just utterly ridiculous. We have to close down every military base in the region. We have to, we have to declare ourselves monsters who lost the war, and there are all these other silly details in there that we will never agree to. So that shows you the difficulty of negotiating
Yeah.
it. But if we don't take the Strait of Hormuz, what happens then? What happens then is that there are a lot of countries, especially in Asia, that are going to cozy up to Iran and strengthen it, especially China, which gets an awful lot of its oil from that strait. And if you had a really great negotiating team, if you had James Baker and others of that ilk, and the aforementioned Mr. Holbrook, doing this, you might have a shot. But I don't think that Trump's golf buddy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner are really world-class negotiators, except for their own interests.
Well, even Iran now is saying that they don't want to talk to them; they want to talk to Vance. That that hey, if we're going to talk, can we talk to Vance? Because my guess is they see Vance as more of the isolationist in the the MAGA isolationist, and maybe they can work out a better deal with him. But they're not. Witkoff and those guys are not going. They're not going to make any inroads with the Iranians. I don't think. We'll see. I just think the more Americans see this, the buildup of the military, the troops going, being put in position, the threat of troops on the ground. I think they're all hoping that this is a bluff of some kind. I don't think the American people want any of this. They didn't. This was a war of choice, and they've chosen to say hell no, and they've got a president now who's gotten that message, but I don't think can figure out how to get out.
You're right. I think that I want to talk about J.D. Vance in a minute, but I think that what would happen is this: that if we invade, and it'll be a spectacular invasion, if the Marines storm Karg Island and the 82nd Airborne parachutes into the heights, there'll be an upsurge of public support for a week or so. When this thing lasts, as wars do, especially difficult wars, when it lasts beyond 3 weeks, look, we're in the fourth week now.
Yeah.
And the president of the United States thinks it's gone on way too long, which shows you how little he understands what he got into in the first place. But I think that while there'll be initial support for boots on the ground, that will evaporate very quickly. And meanwhile, this is a very interesting week to be J.D. Vance. How do you evaluate the Vance versus Marco Rubio campaign, which has already begun, I think?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, this is Vance's only shot. I mean, if he could does somehow negotiate the end of this in the leading diplomatic person who leads to the successful opening of the Strait of Hormuz and ending this war, that would be like. Then I think that propels him. Even if everybody was against the war, the MAGA who did not want to go into the Middle East, they're all it's a win-win-win for him. That's a win for him. On the other hand, this could be like Biden giving Kamala Harris fighting immigration and drug stuff in South and Central America, the one job that you can't possibly succeed at, and ergo, it could just be, J.D. Vance falling flat on his face as the war keeps dragging on. Troops take longer to get there. We do put troops on the ground. He's failing he didn't stop that moment of putting troops on the ground. Even more MAGA ire about, he loses that group. So, no, I think this is a really interesting, be careful what you ask for. I don't know, or wish for. I don't know if he wished for this or not, but.
No, I think, I think, how much I hate to make predictions, Joe. Journalists are never so foolish as
tell people why you hate to make predictions, particularly about. Tell people why.
Because we don't know enough. Because we can be wrong. I had a very good friend, a Newsweek colleague back in the mid '90s, who during the war in Kosovo announced without any question that the bombing campaign in Kosovo had been a complete failure in Serbia. And the very next day, Milosevic, the Serbian president, threw in the towel. He waved the white flag. So we can make fools of ourselves very easily.
Yeah.
And I've done it in the past. I mean,
well, I've given up on that. I make a fool of myself many, many times. The more podcasts I do, but I have no fear of that. But of predicting we should not put troops on the ground. I'm just going to make that. I don't think that's going to be as successful as the president thinks. But
I'll make a fearless prediction of another sort. Okay. That if J.D. Vance does what I do not expect he'll be able to do, if he makes real progress in these negotiations, his fearless leader will yank him out of the negotiations and take the place himself. Right. The only way this war ends in negotiation is if Donald Trump believes he's given the appearance of ending it himself.
Right. Yeah.
So you don't want to
be something I had not thought of
any circumstances right now. But you also have to leave open the possibility, which is a real possibility, and I just don't know how possible the possibility is that we can do this, that we can open the straits. It's going to take more than Donald Trump thinks, but we probably can do it.
It may take 70,000, 100,000 troops. Overall, that's what I'm saying. When you start to get the American people have seen those numbers before. They've seen that, the Iraq, Afghanistan. I keep going back to the fact that we captured Saddam Hussein on December 12th, 2003. We didn't 8 years later before we pulled the troops out, and then we went back in to stop ISIS. So it's like these things. No one wants the troops on the ground in the Middle East. That's what they thought that they were. One of the reasons they thought they were voting for Trump was exactly that. I think this is crossing a line that I don't even know. Look, I think the American military can do this, but it's going to take more. More troops, longer, more time than Trump wants, for sure.
Well, that's for sure.
And two, they may not know how long. I mean, I'm talking about our Joint Chiefs and everybody. Predicting how long it will take to do this. I'm not talking about the taking of the island, but to actually clear the Straits of Hormuz and take care of all the asymmetric, the speed boats and mines and those things. The fact that drones are really difficult to stop in the first half mile or so from when they're launched on their target. Those are all problems, I think, that we can learn some things from Ukraine and other places, but I still don't think they've They understand this warfare enough to project, oh yeah, we can get this done in 2 weeks, boss. I don't.
There's a bifurcation in the military mind that makes things really, really difficult to be an excellent flag officer. The first thing is that real military thinkers, people like Jim Mattis, David Petraeus, I think Dan Kane, are obsessed with preparations. They don't do something as serious as boots on the ground. They don't do something as serious as an air war without minuscule preparation. And when you go into minuscule preparation, when you go into war games, you find all the things that can go wrong. What was it Mike Tyson said? Every battle plan works until you get punched in the mouth. Right. And so there is that. They are very, very cautious about doing this. The other side of their personality is that they believe it's their job to follow civilian leadership. Right. And if the president says go, they go. And so I don't envy Dan Kane this week. I don't envy J.D. Vance this week. I don't envy Donald Trump this week.
But that's actually my point. If the Joint Chiefs were in charge of this,
it wouldn't have happened.
Right, it wouldn't have happened. And two, would they be taking 10 weeks to prepare for putting troops on the ground? But they're being ordered probably by our, I mean, if they get the order, it's going to be a premature order. I mean, this is what I'm trying to say. He won't want to wait. If they're telling him it's going to take us 10 weeks, he's not going to want to wait 10 weeks. This is my point. And so that's how you blunder. It's not our military that's going to, that creates the blunder. It's the leadership. It's the president. It's the commander in chief. And like you said, they're going to follow the order. And even if they think they need to have more time to prepare and to do it right, he's going to trip that wire way too soon, or way earlier, I think, than our military leadership would have wanted. And you just said it. If it was up to them, we wouldn't have been in Iran in the first place. So this is why I think this could compound in a way that leaves the strait in a much longer protracted thing than definitely that Trump wants, or that the country has the patience for.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that we've probably gnawed this bone quite a bit. What are the Democrats doing while no one's looking? What's happening now? I mean, you've been out there in Iowa and you keep track of the party. And nobody's really thinking about the Democrats right now because everybody is obsessed with this stuff.
Well, no, but you had special elections yesterday. Democrats, again, like they would flip the Mar-a-Lago district in Florida. I mean, in Florida, the district, the legislative district that includes Mar-a-Lago, that was won by the Republican by double digits the last time we had the election, flipped, I think, by at least 10 points. So what I'm saying is all of this is, it's 11 points. There it is. Yeah, this is my stat of the week. Thanks for pulling that up, Joe. But that's the swing in Emily Gregory's special election victory in the Florida House District 87. It's Trump's home district. This is, so like I said, and I've been saying this, I know everybody's focused, and I know you've been very focused on how toxic the Democratic brand is, and it is. But Trump and MAGA have become even more toxic. That's the only way you can explain this result. And it happened yesterday in a couple places. It's happened all last year and all this year, every time we've had one. Mm-hmm. And I don't see how, regardless of what caused $4 gasoline, I don't see how that helps. I don't see a
Right.
war of choice helping. I don't see putting troops on the ground in the Middle East helps. That's helps change this. So I know we did. Yes, we gnawed on this bone for quite a while, but I've become more just being out there. The show I do on the ground, being out there in Iowa, seeing what's going on, looking at the exit, what people are telling exit pollsters, looking at focus groups. No, this is just another anchor that's pulling down on every Republican on the ballot in the Senate and the House. So they wanted this over real quick too, but that's my point. I just think there's a lot of, because of we started out, you said policy and politics. The politics of this is what's driving the urge to end this as fast as possible. Because
Absolutely.
It's politics that are driving it. And that's what I'm saying. It's
the policy that's preventing it.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. I have one last question, because I think we're reaching the end of our tether. Yeah. I have known Chuck Schumer for how many years now? 40 or 50 years, and I always liked the guy, but he was always pretty obvious about what his goals were. Mostly raising money, as much money as he possibly could. Sure. And I think that the question now is, has he reached his sell-by date? I think that this is going to be an issue as we go on in this election year within the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And I think part of the question is whether Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez decides to run against him for Senate.
No, well, look, I've been out on the record saying that, when Nancy passed passed leadership to Hakeem, that would have been a good time for Chuck to do the same. So, and I do think it's it's likely that the Senate caucus will choose a different leader after this election. Maybe not if we get the majority back, and he's raised quite a bit of money to make that possible. But no, I think it's the right leader for when you could negotiate with the other side, when you had to corral the votes in your caucus to put some votes on the other side together to get something done. Probably no one better than Chuck Schumer at doing that on our side. That's not the place we're in anymore. We're sitting here at a very perilous time as we enter into the 26th election, and I think we need, Chris Murphy or someone like that might be a more opposition leader for this moment. But hey, Chuck Schumer is the leader in the Senate right now on the Democratic side, and I don't think that's going to change between now and November. So I think it'll be an issue in a lot of these races. You're already seeing, people, Democrats being attacked because they're somehow the magical choice of Chuck Schumer. That's because and I don't think any of them have, any of them have received a Chuck Schumer endorsement. It's just the other guy says, "Oh, he's Washington's pick. He's Chuck Schumer's guy," and it actually hurts. So when you get that, when you're becoming an issue in the primaries that you're hoping you win so that you can win in November, I think that is a signal.
I will say that that's beginning to happen for Chuck, but he isn't nearly as toxic a brand as Nancy Pelosi was toward the end of her years. All Republicans had to do was just say Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah. Well, that's because they demonized the living daylights out of.
They did, and they haven't been able to do that. You can't. You can't demonize a pillow. And that's what, unless it's a My Pillow. And Chuck is essentially a pillow. You punch him and it regains its form. And he doesn't piss anybody off really directly, except in concept, in the fact that he's gotten so old. And
they'll look, the reality is, like I said, he's the leader in the Senate. It's gonna I think it's very unlikely that he'll be win or lose, that there won't be a new leader after this election. But hey, it's why we have elections. It's why you and I talk about this stuff, and we'll see. But anyway, Joe, where can people, the Sanity Clause, talk about where else people can find your stuff?
Well, it's Joseph Klein. Substack is the only person aside from my mother who called me Joseph. Joseph Klein .sanityclause at substack.com. But one thing I should say is that, these things change from week to week, but next week we're going to be graced with the presence of one of the more creative young Democratic politicians that I've spoken to recently. It's Congressman Jake Auchincloss from Massachusetts. And I hope that by saying this, I will shame him into being there.
Actually showing up. Yeah, that's what.
Yes.
Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Joe. We'll see you next week.
Okay, great.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.